Good afternoon, members, officers and any members of the public in the public gallery and viewing on live stream. Welcome to this meeting of the Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Graham Cone and I am chairing this meeting. My Vice Chair is Councillor Stephen Drew, sitting to my right. I will introduce other attendees when I invite them to speak. Those in the chamber are reminded that this meeting is being live streamed. Normal procedure at Scrutiny and Overview Committee meetings is to review and make recommendations to Cabinet by affirmation. Only those members of the committee present in the chamber will be able to move and second motions to affirm. However, members present virtually may speak in the debate. May I ask those who are joining us remotely to ensure that their cameras and microphones remain off unless they are addressing the committee. For those of us present in the room, please ensure your microphone is close to you. Speak clearly when addressing the room. Finally, a report of this meeting will be presented at Cabinet at the meeting on the 16th of April. Neither myself or the Vice Chair will be available to attend the committee meeting. Is there anyone else in the room that would be able to attend that meeting? Councillor Stobart. Thank you for that. So Councillor Stobart will address the Cabinet on our behalf. Thank you for doing that, Councillor Stobart. So I'll then move to the agenda. So first we have apologies for absence. Ian, have we got any? That's okay.
Thank you. We've got apologies from Councillor Sally Ann Hart and also from the Cabinet, Councillor John Williams and Councillor Bill Handley.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that, Ian. So then we'll go on to declarations of interest. Have any members got anything they wanted to declare at the beginning of the meeting? No? Okay, so we'll move on to minutes of the previous meeting, pages 3 to 8. Has anybody got any alterations, comments or things they want to ask on the written meetings within your agenda pack from the last meeting? Councillor Judith Rippeth.
Just to say that I'll abstain as I wasn't present.
Thank you for that. Anybody else? Any questions or anything they want to raise? No? Okay, so we will move on to agenda item 4, public questions. So we've had no public questions submitted to the meeting. So we now move on to the substantive item, which is the peer review action plan, which is on pages 9 to 20. And we'll start there. So has anybody got anything that they want to raise or who would like to start in terms of questioning? Councillor Stobart.
Chair, thank you. Could I just clarify, we are looking at the peer review action plan.
Agreed.
And my first comment and then question. And I've got quite a lot that I can say, but I just wanted to start off with perhaps a general comment and a general question. The general comment is peer review is an excellent process and it's used not just in local government but elsewhere. It's a very good way of getting an external perspective, and if the views are given firmly and fairly, which I believe they have done here, then it can be a very positive kind of step to take. But I think one of the things in this kind of critical friend environment is a willingness sometimes to push back and to, in a sense, partly justify your position or explain why, a particular comment needs something added to it. In other words, there's a constructive dialogue. Now, here comes the question. The report is quite comprehensive and kind of speaks to that kind of an issue, but it's not brought up explicitly. But would perhaps members of Cabinet and officers like to comment on what was that kind of dialogue that took place that resulted in the recommendations? Was there any pushing back? What was the atmosphere? And the resulting recommendations are the result of a kind of constructive engagement as opposed to simply being told. So there's my question.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stobart. I'll come to Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So that's a really interesting question. And so absolutely, I agree that, you know, this critical friend approach is good. I fear that its days are numbered because, you know, we have the government very much wanting to go for a far more Ofsted type approach, and the LGA has already been instructed to enhance, you know, its peer reviews. One of the criticisms of the LGA approach by government very recently has been that we have been able to do some negotiation over the final report, and that's always been accepted, that, you know, it was built into the whole mechanism of it, that you could do that pushback if you felt that it was unfair or people hadn't understood stuff, or, you know, there was some, you know, they were introducing some sort of risk within the report. So we were very mindful that we were in this sort of period, we're in this period of transition from the old style into this far more top-down inspector type, you know, model that the government supports, and the Local Government Association gets 18 million of its core funding for this work directly from government. So, you know, they're fairly hamstrung, really, in agreeing to what the government want on this. So I think, and I mean, I might ask the Chief Executive to corroborate what I'm saying, I think we were mindful that we had to be cautious in our pushback. And there, you know, there are one or two comments in the report which I fear came from a single interviewee, which weren't fully corroborated. They hadn't been taken them back and done that sort of more 360-degree corroboration. And that was my fear there. But as I say, we are moving into a new world, and I think it's a great shame, because I think, you know, I think the value of them are when people can welcome having corporate peer review, and they feel that they have some control over the final report, which means that they can wholeheartedly embrace them and support them. If it becomes something far more like Ofsted, then actually I think people will start getting a bit twitchy about it. But I don't know if the Chief Executive would like to, you know, say whether her experience reflects my own.
Liz Watts.
Thank you. And yes, Chair, I think Councillor Smith is absolutely right. The only thing that I would add is, I think I'd sort of described two stages of the peer review. So there was when the peers were on site, and at the end of every day, they were there for 3.5 days, and at the end of every day we had a feedback meeting. And that was a point where we were able to say, okay, you may want to go and, you know, talk to that person or that team if we felt that they had kind of, you know, come to a conclusion too early, for example. So we did certainly give some feedback during the period when they were on site. When we got the report, we didn't provide any feedback at all, other than I think there was one kind of word change because they called some organisation by the wrong name. So apart from that, we didn't comment at all on what, in some cases, we thought was, in a minority of cases, we thought they hadn't necessarily drawn the right conclusion. As Councillor Smith said, you know, occasionally they'd used that they hadn't triangulated enough.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stobart.
No, through you, Chair, thank you. That's very good clarification of the process. And I think those daily reviews, yeah, you know, from my experience elsewhere, very useful, because they do help or give the opportunity for clarification. So, yeah, thank you for those replies. Yeah.
Lovely. Okay. I'll come to Councillor Bradnam next.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. I note that the action plan that we have, which starts on page 13 of our agenda pack, follows broadly the order of the recommendations that came up in the full and the final report. But I just wondered whether officers or indeed senior leadership team had actually considered whether there was a priority order in which any of these actions needed to be done. Obviously, they've got dates on them, and that may reflect a decision-making that some elements needed to be attacked quickly, but or dealt with or approached promptly. But I just wondered, is that a result of a sort of prioritisation exercise, or are they all being dealt with equal importance, but these dates just happen to be how they've worked out?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
So could I ask Jeff Membry to answer that question, because he's the one who put all the sort of prioritisation and dates together, and I'd be winging it.
Jeff Membry.
Yes, through you, Chair. Indeed, when we as a leadership team met to consider the recommendations, actually we grouped them rather differently than this, and we grouped ones that seemed to have fit together well, and we went through and talked about which ones were important to do quickly and which ones could take a little bit longer. I mean, some of the more straightforward ones, such as, for example, having the media review from the LGA, I think we've pushed that further down the line. So yes, we are tackling these in an order that we feel will get the best results most quickly.
Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify that, but for simplicity when it comes to doing the report, so that people can match up the recommendations, we've done it in the order that the recommendations were listed.
You've restored the order of the original report, haven't you? Thank you very much. And I'm encouraged to hear that you had the same instinctive reaction to the wealth of them that I did, that some might be easier to deal with than others and some needed to be tackled early, but thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. We'll come to James Hobro.
Thank you, Chair. So I have some general comments and a couple of tidying up suggestions and a question about one part of the report, if that's okay. So my general comments are that having seen the report, the peer review report, and these recommendations, it seems to me this was a very valuable exercise. It seems to have been very thorough. I'm really pleased that we as a council have put in such a thorough response, and it looks to me as if this is a good way of focusing on continuous improvement. So a fantastically useful exercise overall. So the couple of pernickety things, so on page 15, row 2, column 2, the word veil, I think, should be value, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly what it's supposed to be, but I think that's probably supposed to be value. The other pernickety comment I had was that there are several acronyms in there, VCS, TOM, even KPI. We all know what some of these are, but I think they probably ought to be defined the first time they're used. So my question was really about one of the recommendations. So I think most of these recommendations are really good specific lists of clear action items where something is going to change. One of them I felt wasn't quite as clear as the others. So this is recommendation 2. And so this is page 13 in the middle of the page. The recommendation is about relationships with local key partners. And really what the action plan says is to continue parish planning workshops and to continue to build effective relationships with other partners. What wasn't clear to me reading this is what exactly what was asked for that's different from what we're doing already, and what action we have here that's different from what we're doing already. And I wondered if perhaps I could ask for a bit of detail on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hobro. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So it's interesting you picked that up, because when we read that part in the report, we didn't know what they wanted either. And we went back to them and asked them, and they haven't responded. Have we had some, because initially they didn't respond, because we asked for clarification. Yes, please. If I may refer to Liz, please.
Sorry, through you, Chair. I asked for more detail from the peer review team, and unfortunately they had destroyed their notes, so they were unable to recall what was in the notes, and therefore they couldn't give us more detail. So, notwithstanding that, the conversations that we'd had during the week led us to conclude that these were the actions that would be appropriate in the action plan.
Yeah.
So, I'd say it was very woolly, quite honestly. And, I think, perhaps it was an acknowledgement that we are functioning in a very, very complex partnership environment, probably more so than anywhere else in the country, arguably. We knew that there had been some frustration when they interviewed parish councils about level of our engagement, which actually, we do try very hard, but the fact that people are still not satisfied, indicated that we could do more there. So that seemed an obvious one. You'll be aware that relationships within the combined authority are tricky, but they've just had their best value notice reaffirmed. So we're working hard within that. So I think what we're doing here is acknowledging the importance of our partnerships, the strength of our partnerships, and the fact that one needs to keep on nurturing them if they are to continue to, deliver for the residents of South Cambridgeshire.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bridget Smith. Councillor Hobro, I'll just come in briefly there. I think some of the councillors had sort of looked at that recommendation and thought that, given it talks about a reset, it seems quite a strong use of language, and then in the actions it talks about sort of continuing to build effective. There seemed a bit of a disconnect between the two without sort of detail in it, is I think what some people had felt, but yeah.
So going back to Councillor Stobart's point about pushback, we do not recognise the need for a reset of our key strategic partnerships. Absolutely, we need to keep on working on them. But I think it was a strange use of a word. If Scrutiny and Overview have a different view and can see a need for any of our partnerships needing a reset, then we will be very pleased to hear that.
Thank you for that, Councillor Smith. Councillor Hobro, do you want to come back on that at all?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I mean, that seems a very reasonable explanation. Thank you for all the detail. I also find it hard to understand what this reset is about, and I think simply keeping these areas as a focus for continuous improvement seems to be the reasonable response in this situation. And I mean, my comment on parish councils is that the fact that there are officers in this council who are so ready to be available to talk to parish councils is really crucial. I found this really crucial in maintaining the relationship between parish councils and this council. I certainly hope that will continue. I've got no reason to believe that it won't. But there are specific areas like that that I think are really valuable in terms of defining and improving the relationship between parish councils and district councils. So I was curious as to what might go in there. But ultimately, it's about talking to one another and covering the issues that really matter to the stakeholders. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hobro. I'll come to Councillor Bearpark, Councillor Paul Bearpark.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I did have a similar point actually to Councillor Hobro about recommendation 2. I suppose just to add to that, obviously we work in this so-called rich governance environment in our area. It's not just within the gift of South Cambs District Council to make that work effectively. It's for all the partners. So it's not just an action. It can't just be an action for South Cambs, I guess. But in general, I think just in terms of the actions in Table 1, I think a good test for those actions would be to kind of determine how actionable they are. And we looked at, and I looked at recommendation 2 specifically and thought, actually, I can't see how those actions are particularly actionable. So maybe they need to be revisited and kind of broken down into something that's a bit more manageable. The other point about that recommendation too was the responsible officers are the leadership team and the cabinet. That's quite a broad set of people that are responsible for that one. So maybe it needs to be an individual or a couple of individuals as well who are ultimately responsible. And just a general point about the actions. I think it would be helpful to know to what extent is the action going to be business as usual versus a modification to business as usual versus a completely new activity. So I think partly that would help with understanding how much effort each of these is, because we don't really understand from the actions how much work this will entail. So breaking it down into those three categories might help with that.
Okay, so just to come back there, Councillor Paul Bearpark, the recommendation there in the first part, and then sort of how we break that down, colour code it, separate the lists in terms of the two separate actions, you know, what are we already doing and where do we need to focus more on, essentially? Does that, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Just understanding a bit more how it's kind of expanding on what we do already versus something completely new activity.
And the
I think you can infer it, but it's not. But it would be nice to have it clarified.
Yeah, and the recommendation originally was around making it measurable, essentially, in part 2, bullet point 2. You're saying that this would be hard to measure. Am I right in?
It would be good to make the actions measurable in some way, yes.
Okay.
And making it possible to have a target, a measurable target related to the action, I think would be helpful.
Okay, yeah. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So if I may defer to Jeff Membry and also to Councillor Milnes briefly, thank you.
Councillor Milnes,
yeah,
sorry.
thank you.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things I'd like to add to that. James Havro mentioned the relationship with parishes, and I think it is really important that we accentuate actually what we do. So both our chief executive and leader are frequent visitors across the district to our parish councils, and we make great effort to include them in quarterly meetings. I think we do here, which may have been missed by the peer review body. And that was certainly part of my reservation in this regard, as the member sitting on the GCP with Bridget as substitute now. I mean, the number of meetings and workshops, briefings, the whole lot was, I don't think, wasn't visible to the review team. I don't think they saw that in action. And in the same way, Bridget and other of our members on the CPCA wasn't really taken into full account, I feel. And then there's a whole raft of other less obvious partners. So the sub-regional transport body, England's Economic Heartland, and the East of England Transport Network, and the East-West Rail Partnership. These are. I mean, this week alone, I've spent, at least 5 hours in meetings with other people in partnerships, and I don't think that was visible. So it is clearly important that we develop those and do as much as we can. But there was, I think, a missing element in the review in that respect.
Thank you, Councillor Milnes. I'll come back to Councillor Paul Bearpark. Did you want to follow up on that at all?
I think Councillor Milnes was actually answering Councillor Hobro's question.
Well, if Jeff Membry could come in to respond more specifically to you about how we can, if it's possible, to make this measurable.
Jeff Membry?
I'm sure we can find a way to make recommendation to a little bit more measurable, for example, talk about the number of meetings. On your other point, actually, the vast majority of these recommendations are actually about doing things differently rather than doing extra things. Most of these are saying, well, actually, if you shift your focus, so use the same resource you've got at the moment, but shift your focus, we think you'll get some better results. And some of the others were where we were having conversations with the team, talking about things that we were planning to do. And they've gone, yeah, that's a really good idea, crack on and do them then. So there's one or two minor things, like we weren't planning in this year to undertake the LJ 3-day communication review. So that'll be a little bit extra, and depending upon what comes out of that, there might be some additional work for the comms team. But the vast majority of this is about doing things differently or going on to do the things that we were planning to do anyway. Hope that's helpful.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Bear-Part, was that okay, that answer?
No, thank you very much for that.
Lovely.
That's helpful.
We've noted the recommendation as well at the beginning, okay? So if we come on to Councillor Aidan van der Weyer.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm afraid I'm going to say something about recommendation 2 as well. It is undeniable that some of our key strategic relationships are poor. It is also undeniable that some of our parish councils are critical of us in different respects. And I think it's understandable that anyone coming in to look at this, look at us with fresh eyes, look at the environment we're working in, would observe this as a serious problem and would ask how it could be improved. I agree, we do lots of really good things. We're aware of these issues, we take them seriously, we try to address them. What I take this recommendation as doing is challenging us to think about things differently, think about whether we can do anything more in different ways. I'm not quite sure whether the response here does that or what's been said so far does that, but I certainly feel that we could do a bit more thinking about this point, about how we can do things differently, better, try something else. If someone outside is coming in and saying, this is a serious problem, we're using serious words, as Councillor Cohn said, I think we have to take it seriously and think a bit more. We're not going to immediately think here how we can do solve this now, but it's an ongoing thing rather than something that we can just say that they've missed some of the things that we're doing or that we are doing well.
Thank you, Councillor van der Weyer. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So there are undoubtedly some, parish councils who would like us to do more or do things differently. And one of the reasons for the liaison forum meetings is for us to glean directly from them what it is they want us to do. And we always accommodate them. Some of the engagement between the parish councils and us is poor, and that's not our fault. Horses to water. You can lay. It's been made. It's been obvious recently when there's been complaints about planning training that there are some parish councils that are not taking up our offer of planning training, even though we make the offer time and time again. So I think we are doing our utmost to make sure that parish councillors, parish clerks know exactly what's on offer, and we make it as easy as possible for them to engage with. Now, in relation to Councillor van der Weyer's comment about some of our partnerships being poor, I don't recognise that, actually. I think our strategic partnerships, the relationships in our strategic partnerships are good. I've been in a meeting today of the Pan-Regional Partnership. We are the lead partner, we are the lead political partner in that. So, we are viewed very, very positively. I think within the Greater Cambridge Partnership, I think that's a very, I think it's a very functional partnership, which I think is working well. The Combined Authority, the problem isn't South Cambridge's relationship with the Combined Authority. The problem, as has been highlighted in the latest Best Value Notice, is about the relationships within the board of it. So that's not South Cambridge's problem, that's a problem within the Combined Authority itself. And, all the other partnerships which Councillor Milnes mentioned, East West Rail, Water Resources East, we are accepted as being a good partner and we are valued and people want us on their partnerships and we get more invitations to be part of partnerships than actually we have capacity to accommodate. So, as I say, I think, I think perhaps what we need to do is somehow be able to corroborate, what I'm saying, and somehow capture feedback from our strategic partners about their views of us. And I think we could probably take that away, because if I'm saying, our relationship is really good with the Pan-Regional Partnership, it's only fair that, I'd say to them, do you agree? And how could we be a better partner? So perhaps there's something along those lines that we could build in. So there is actually some evidence rather than me anecdotally just telling you that everything in the garden's rosy.
Which comes back to what we were saying before with Councillor Paul Bear Park about measuring things, I suppose. Councillor Aidan van der Weyer.
No, that's right. Yeah, you're quite right. This is completely immeasurable. So yes, it's very difficult to get much further. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Stephen Drew.
Sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Cohen. Just going back maybe to the start, a few comments have been made since. Is it the position of the council, both the leadership side in terms of the administration and the officers, that the peer review that was carried out here was somehow fundamentally flawed? Because the criticisms that are being made seem to suggest that the people who came in and did it have missed incredibly obvious things that they should have been able to see. And there seems to be a sense that it is an unreasonable report or is an unfair report, and that they have missed the work that has been done in relation to parish councils, that they have missed the good work that is done in relation to strategic partners, that they have not understood a number of things. So I suppose my question, before we go on and look at other bits, is it the view of the council that the peer review carried out at South Cambridge District Council is somehow fundamentally flawed, and that we should launch a formal challenge against it?
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So if I could start, and then if I could pass on to Councillor Mills.
Yeah.
So the issue, I think this is, the sort of fundamental flaw in corporate peer reviews is that they happen over a very short period of time. So I think ours was kind of 3.5 days. 3.5 days? Yeah, 3.5 days. So how do you get to understand everything within 3.5 days? Now, we circulated at the outset what the brief was. So there's a standardised brief for corporate peer reviews that they have to look at. They have to look at governance. They have to look at finance. They have to look at cultural stuff. I can't remember what the other ones are. But there's a set brief for what they're looking at. The panel was very aware of the issue over the 4-day week, and they said that they would not be looking at it. In fact, they did comment on it, because I think they found it was rather unavoidable. But they definitely weren't here to give to in any way do a review of our 4-day week trial. So I think you could argue that these things are always flawed, but they are independent, and we had chosen. We chose the Liberal Democrat leader. The Conservative group chose the Conservative leader. The LGA, I don't know whether we had any choice over the officers or whether the LGA just assigned them. So it's independent. It's not. Do people come with preconceptions? I don't think you can say that. I think we just have to. We have to accept that this is the model. It's the same model for everybody. It's the same remit for everybody. And I think, it would be unrealistic to think you'd love everything, you'd love everything that they said. And, they're not coming looking for trouble and looking for mistakes. But it's perfectly obvious from the latest local government minister that what government are after are red flags that could indicate serious failures in councils, and they most certainly didn't find that with us. So, yes, if it had all just said we're just all totally fabulous, that would have been marvellous. But that's not. Nobody would have believed it. Actually, they would have thought we'd bribed them. If I may hand on to Councillor Mills, and I don't know if the Chief Executive would like to comment as well.
Councillor Mills.
Yeah, just to add to that, and my comment over my own involvement. I mean, GCP is clearly an important component of our partnership working, and they only had 3.5 days, and I wasn't interviewed by them, asked by them, given any evidence to them. So it's not unreasonable that we feel that they have missed important parts of some of that partnership working if they don't see our visits to the parish council, which they can't. I mean, that's not realistic to expect them to do, to see how we engage. But Bridget and Liz both attend our parish councils on a frequent basis, and that's, for me, would be evidence that they may have missed, because if they knew that and saw the frequency of that, they might be more inclined to think that we make a lot of effort.
Liz Watts, did you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I think as officers we found the whole process very, very useful. And, the role of the peer review team is to hold a mirror up to the organisation. It's not to say necessarily, what you should or shouldn't be doing. It's to ask you to reflect on what you're doing and is it working, is it serving your communities best? But by and large, we found all the recommendations really, really useful in that respect. I think the only one, and it's interesting that members have kind of identified it, that we were a bit unclear about was recommendation 2, for the reasons that have already been articulated in this meeting. But broadly, we found it an incredibly useful process and report, and we're keen to get on and implement the action plan.
Still me? Okay, so just to kind of finish on that one, I suppose my kind of first principle in relation to it is that it's important to hear from both Councillor Smith and Councillor Milnes, and now from the Chief Executive as well, that there is a clear sense of confidence in the peer review report, and confidence in the process, despite some concerns, because I think that obviously residents are entitled to expect that when their council is reviewed, that their council absolutely takes on board what is said seriously and is absolutely willing to respond to it in a really positive way. Just wanted to kind of check on that first. I have a couple of other things I wanted to go on to. Since we're still fairly early on in the recommendations, I just briefly want to comment, I suppose, in relation to recommendation 2. I may be missing something here, but to me, recommendation 2 is absolutely crystal clear, and I don't see any ambiguity in it whatsoever. Reset and define relationships at a local regional level with key partners to support the delivery of business plan priorities. To me, in any organisation I was part of leading, if I am told to reset my relationships, it is telling me that I need to start from scratch, I need to go to each of those strategic partners, and I need to talk to them and say to them, how's it going? How is our relationship going? Do you like what we are doing? Do we communicate well with you? Do you understand our vision? This is what we understand about your vision. And to start from an attitude of, I'm not going to defend what I'm currently doing. I'm not going to criticise what I'm currently doing. I am literally going to reset my relationship. And I must confess that to me, that seems incredibly simple. And that is what I would take away from that. I have had recommendations like this in my professional capacity in terms of leading schools and other organisations, where I have been told as a leader you need to reset your relationships. And to me, it seems really simple. That is my comment. If anyone wishes to come back, that's fine. Otherwise, I'll just move on to my final question at this stage.
Councillor Bridget.
So thank you, Councillor Drew. So I think I know that when I responded to the last one, I think that's kind of the direction of travel I was going on. That I'm telling you that it's all good, but actually we need to get the feedback. So I'm very happy to take that as a recommendation. That and I'm sure we can do it. We can do some work just to get that corroboration, but also ask people: is there anything that we should be doing differently, anything we should be doing better. It's a, you know, it's a bit of a kind of performance review on ourselves, isn't it? So I think that's, I think that would be a sensible
the hopeful
recommendation coming
response
from
would
Scrutiny.
be that people come back going, well, we like 99% of what you do, and at that point, well, we've attempted to reset, but it wasn't necessary.
Yeah. I think that's a helpful suggestion from Scrutiny.
If I can just jump onto recommendation 3, I think recommendation 3A, based on information from other conversations, would it be fair to say that recommendation 3A is going to be exceptionally difficult based on decisions that are being made in relation to audits and accounts which are beyond our control? Would that be a fair comment, Councillor Smith?
Yes, absolutely. Do you want any detail? Because we're going to be doing... No,
I think we kind of know.
Liz Watts has shared all this rather frustrating information with you, which means that, you know, accounts won't be properly closed, and, you know, we'll be starting new financial year with a, you know, something that is less than perfect.
Liz Watts?
So, but this is a point of accuracy. We will close the accounts. The issue is about the audit. And so, in terms of this action plan, we have and already are accelerating the closure of the outstanding accounts, so there's no problem with that as a recommendation.
Okay, great, thank you. My apologies, I misunderstood.
I've just got a point of information from Councillor Helen Lee.
Thank you, Chair. So, yes, I just thought it might be helpful. I've actually brought the Audit Committee minutes from yesterday, I think it was, just to clarify this in relation to point 3A. I think the recommendation was probably written before this guidance was issued by national government, and to an extent it's a bit redundant now because the political situation has moved beyond this. But I'll just read these 3 points out because I think they're helpful to clarify why. So the draft statement of accounts for the year 2021-22 were approved in January 2024, and the draft accounts for 22-23 are currently in progress. It is expected that these will be ready by the 31st of March 2024. Once completed, the accounts will need to be approved by the Audit Committee, an additional meeting in May 2024. Ernst & Young, who are our current auditors, will be carrying out their value for money work on both the 2021-22 accounts and the 22-23 accounts, and they will report on that in due course. They've also said that they will not be carrying out a full audit, so that's the other part of the audit which takes place, and they're intending to issue a disclaimer in whatever the agreed wording format is, which will be something which is issued from national government. It will be probably a standard phrase for both the 2021 and 22-23 accounts. So just to be clear, I think perhaps the situation has moved on beyond point 3A. Yes, so I think perhaps in terms of addressing this in this action plan, it might be very helpful to actually state that and to separate that point 3A from B, C, points B and C. Perhaps the only validity of point A is to recognise that the accounts team has done a great deal of work recently to improve the efficiency and the quality of work that they're producing, and that would be helpful to continue going forward so that we continue to meet accounting deadlines. But that's a slightly different thing to what's recommended there.
Thank you for that point of information, Councillor Lehman, and the recommendation that's come from that. Councillor Drew.
Great, thank you. My final one then moves on to 3B. I hope it can be expanded upon and explained. I don't see how the actions in number 3 deal with 3B. So I apologise if that's my failing to read and understand, as we've just established in relation to 3A when I made slightly the wrong wording. I can't see how the recommended actions in 3 meet the requirement of recommendation 3B. So perhaps that could be clarified.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. May I defer to Jeff Membry for the detail of that, please?
Jeff Membry.
Yes, certainly. Thank you, through you, Chair. I think members will be aware that we've got a budget gap coming up in the medium-term financial strategy. Our strategy for addressing that is through the transformation programme and introduction of a target operating model that means that we use the most cost-effective way working pretty much across the board for the council. So where people can access things through a self-serve option, we make that an attractive option that people can use and deliver that at a reduced cost. What was recommended by the peer review is that there was closer really cooperation between the transformation team and the finance team to ensure that we can bring to members details of when transformation savings are going to be delivered, keep a close eye on ensuring that we're delivering those savings against the plan that we've put together, and to ensure that we're using the resource that's available for transformation. And the peer review actually complemented the council on investing in transformation, to move that and ensure that actually the focus over the next couple of years is a more speedy delivery of those savings. Because of course the earlier you deliver the savings, the more impact they have over the medium term. So the strategy we already had, it just probably wasn't written down as an efficiency strategy, but it does require the two services to work hand in glove to ensure that those things are delivered. Not only our two services, but also to talk with other services across the council to ensure that people are engaging with that transformation programme and understand the importance of delivering the efficiency savings early, because by delivering them early, we have to make, the impact will be less upon those individual services. Hopefully that gives you some clarification.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to bring back in Councillor Bridget Smith.
So simplistically, for me, this is about the how rather than the what, isn't it? It's about, so, the focus was on how, so every council has to make efficiency savings. For, our gap is downside less than many people. But, that's not to say, just because it's a lower target saving, it doesn't mean that we can't be achieving it better. And this is about, bringing different service areas together. And, if I look back to 2018, this was a very siloed organisation. That's you wouldn't recognise it now. But I think they've identified that, there could be closer collaboration, which as Jeff says, will hopefully identify those savings earlier on, which means that we're not struggling, before the end of the financial year to realise them. So I think if you realise this is about the how, not the what.
Okay, thank you. That will do for now.
Lovely. Councillor Ellington.
I was going to, I'm a very practical person, and I found recommendation 2, and I'm sorry to go back to it, but when I asked to speak, we were talking about recommendation 2. And it's airy-fairy, fine. So my practical example is one of my residents who went off on one, as one might say, about the 4-day week and the fact that he actually works for a refuse and recycling company, and his company is suffering seriously from lack of drivers because they are moving to a more affable environment of a 4-day week. And clearly he was a very unhappy fella. And my feeling is that some of this is around, and how is that 4-day week affecting other districts that we work with and our partners, and are they having equal sort of problems as the commercial world is? And that was where I would have focused on recommendation 2 rather than parish councils. Thank you.
Councillor Ellington. Councillor Bridget Smith.
So, as I mentioned at the beginning, the team, the Corporate Prepared Challenge team, we know were specifically said they were not looking at the 4-day week, because the kind of core, the core stuff they needed to look at would have got lost in it. So I don't think that's a piece of work for this at all. I do think it's something that, as part of our 4-day week work, we need to look, we need to be mindful of, but not within this.
Thank you. Is that okay, Councillor Ellington? Yep. Okay, we'll move on to Councillor Helen Leeming, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'd like to ask about recommendation 6, please. So the recommendation was to develop a community strategy, and our response was to work with our partners to develop a community statement by September 2024. Now, I wanted to understand whether the community statement was a kind of forerunner to a community strategy, or whether that was our answer to the recommendation to have a community strategy. Because I think that the idea of a community strategy could be potentially quite a big piece of work. It could be a very valuable thing that could direct our work in a broad sense. And if we're only creating a statement by September, I think we may be, well, it depends on whether this community statement is a sort of prelude to a strategy, or if it's our answer to the strategy.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, I'm going to make a stab at this, and then if anybody else wants to come in. I think we've been making huge progress over the last 2-3 years, particularly in how we work with new communities, Cambourne, Northstowe, Waterbeach in particular. I think there's been a lot of lessons learned. So I think we are on a pathway to developing a strategy, which we're developing through experience. What went wrong, what went right. We now have these community forums, which we know are, very well received. It's made a mammoth difference at Northstowe. So I personally think that's the right way to do this. We could put somebody in a dark room and say, write a strategy and then write an overarching statement. But actually, it wouldn't be embedded in experience. And I think these sorts of things, it's really important that we're working it up with our communities, particularly our new communities. Villages like mine have been around since, pre-Doomsday, and, they, to a large degree, look after themselves because they've got all that history. It's very different for the new communities. They need help and they need support. Cambourne's an example of a community that actually got its act together very, very quickly, and we saw that last night with all the lovely dancers from Cambourne who came and entertained us. So I think the strategy, and I'm probably going to come to Jeff. Okay, is an ongoing piece of work which will culminate in a statement once we're really sure that we've got the model as good as we can. But I'm sure this is going to be a dynamic piece of work. Tell me if I'm wrong, please, Chair.
Yes, through you. No, you're not wrong, Leader. I mean, it's the case that the nature of the way communities have been evolving here, we actually already have a large number of smaller strategies, protocols and policies that relate to the community environment. So what we thought would be most helpful at this stage is not to go back and unpick those and redo them into one great big strategy, but to put an overarching statement across the top of it. So what I think our communities are looking for most is clarity of exactly what they can expect from us, the support that they can get from us, and that where we're going forward. So the idea is this will provide that overarching that view. Now, certainly in the future, once we've got a little bit more of a stable environment, I think with our communities, we could certainly look to bring those all together into one single community strategy. But that would, as you rightly suggest, Councillor, be a significant piece of work that would take a long time and a lot of investment. Whereas at the moment, what we're trying to do is use our resource into delivery rather than into strategy writing. I hope that's helpful.
Councillor Lehman, sorry, yeah.
Thank you both. So perhaps I'm right in unpicking what you've said then, to say that the community statement is a first step. But I'm very mindful of the wider context in which we are operating, particularly things like Cambridge 2050 on the horizon. And I think if we were to have something like a full community strategy, which didn't unpick the smaller strategies, but pulled them together into a cohesive vision for our community, I think that would be extremely helpful to underpin our discussions with national government if we had a clear vision of our community strategy here in South Cambridgeshire. Because I think, although there are differences in our communities, we also have a great deal in common.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, yes, thank you. So I don't think this is a first step. I think we've taken a lot of steps, and now, you know, we feel that we're getting to the point where we can make this statement. The statement is it's a promise, isn't it? It's, you know, so, you know, this is, you know, it's a statement of what our communities can expect from us, what they can hold us to account for, and they can come and say, you said in the statement you do this and you haven't done it. So I think that gives the clarification about what our communities can expect from us. On the issue of you know, a one-size-fits-all strategy, I have a reservation about that, and I don't think I can give you an answer now, because I think we need to take it away and we need to give it some really careful thought, because I'm very mindful about the individuality of communities, and I'm very mindful of, even with the new communities, the influence that the existing communities such as Rampton, or around, such as, you know, Fulbourn, Waterbeach and so on, have on them. And I think there's a real risk of, you know, having a strategy that, you know, is little boxes on the hillside, you know, something that doesn't allow for that individuality. And when people get, you know, where people are getting upset about the Cambridge 2050 idea, is that there will be something, you know, bland and of one, you know, one size fits all. So I think, you know, we owe it to our communities to have things that are far more nuanced, that work with the communities and take them with us. And I think that's become really apparent with Northstowe, and I think it's very, very apparent with Waterbeach, that these are communities in their own right, and us just foisting a top-down strategy on them won't actually serve them well. But I think we need to take that away and give it quite a lot more thought.
Councillor Lehman.
Thank you. I don't want us to foist a top-down strategy onto us. I think this would be an excellent way for us to engage with our partners. To go back to question 2,
yeah,
I think it would have to be a consultative and sort of ground upwards approach, rather than us pointing down and saying this is our strategy for you.
Yeah.
But I think what this is asking for, this community strategy, is something bigger than anything we could create before September 24. I just think it's September 24 would be an amalgamation of what we are currently doing and something, a statement. Whereas I think a community strategy is a much, much bigger thing for us. And it's an existential question for what makes South Cambridgeshire.
So I think a lot of people had concerns about the timescales in the report. So if you would like to address that, Councillor.
So I think that's why the recommendation is it's for a community statement, because we can do that within the time frame. And we're confident we can do that within the time frame. But as you quite rightly point out, you know, strategy, you know, when we think how long local plans take, I mean, local plans are community strategies in a way, aren't they? They're strategies for how people, you know, what places are going to be like. So it could be that, you know, that grows out of the local plan. So I'm kind of winging that, I'm afraid, but I am aware that, you know, what we're doing is setting ourselves deliverable targets, because the panel will come back in 6 months' time. So I've recently been back to a council not far away, you know, to kind of assess them on their delivery, and they did really well, which was great. In fact, they'd exceeded expectations. So, you know, there's no point in us setting ourselves up to fail with things that we can't do. But I think there would, you know, the member involvement in the, you know, in this community statement, and particularly Scrutiny overview, I think is going to be really valuable.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I have a second question, which is to do with a comment on page 18. It's it's one of these final points in italics underneath. Agreed that the scrutiny officer would work with the chair and vice chair to develop our work programme to include a longer term look at specific high profile corporate risks. So I think when I read the peer review, it wanted us to, scrutiny to have a more risk-focused approach to our sort of work items. And at the moment, the risk register, which is only one part of our understanding of risk, but a key one, that goes to audit and governance. And I just wondered whether it was something that as a group we could consider about whether our work programme could draw from the risk register or other analysis of risk in the council to set items for the agenda which were based on risk as well.
So I think I'll just touch on that as well. We do use the risk register when deciding things that may come to scrutiny. I think probably what Councillor Lehman is referring to is that should this report have that reflected in the wording of that sentence, essentially. It is what we are doing, I think. It's whether it should explicitly be in that sentence on page 18. Am I right with that, Councillor Lehman?
Yes, to an extent. I think when I read the peer review, it kept coming back to this idea of the scrutiny. Well, there were some very good points about the scrutiny committee, but it also focused on a risk-based approach to our agenda. And perhaps again, this is something that wasn't transparent in the time that they spent with us, but it could be something that we include in our discussions. Perhaps, you know, when we look at the work programme, some discussion of the risk could be put on, you know, next to the items that we choose from as potential, topics for the agenda.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
I mean, I think that's up to scrutiny. I think it's it's up to you. If that's what you want, then that's what you get. That's what you get.
Yeah, from my point of view, I'd be happy to refer to the risk register in there, so it's explicit that we are, Councillor Drew, myself, and the leadership team are reviewing that and working with our colleagues in audit and so forth to make sure that everything on that risk register is covered, essentially.
Thank you.
Yeah, as a recommendation. Thank you. Councillor Libby Earle.
Thank you. I was wanting to ask really if it were possible to have a little more detail on some of these, on some of this plan. There's a lot about what the council will do in terms of the recommendations for peer review, but not a great deal about how it's being done or the progress that's being made towards it. We've got quite a few things that are due in March or April this year, but actually a blank column in the progress. I think it would be quite helpful, bearing in mind that we are open to scrutiny from outside, that anyone reading this has an idea of how we are actually progressing towards meeting some of these outcomes, rather than leaving it until, for instance, January is being complete. Well, how was it completed? There was training delivered. What was that training? We've got, for instance, trying to find a good example. Escalate reporting of, this is 3C, escalate reporting of any forecast shortfalls to leadership team at an early stage to allow corrective action to be promptly undertaken due May 24. How is that actually being done? How do I, as a reviewer, perhaps coming back in a few months' time, see what's being done? It's not actually signposting me or a member of the public to it. It's a blank column at the moment. I think it would be quite helpful to those who are actually trying to meet these outcomes to articulate how they're doing it, what progress has been made, and perhaps formally review it every 3 months or so, every quarter, and put something in that column, because otherwise it goes for a year. The January ones, for instance, training delivered. Well, it would be nice to know what training and how useful it was, and what we're actually seeing as the outcome of that training, how you actually audit it.
Thank you, Councillor Earl. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, so what you've got in front of you is what was submitted back to the LGA. So that's why. So it's as it was submitted. So at the point at which it was submitted, things hadn't been done. The peer review team will come back in 6 months, and we will need to prepare for them a report on progress. And that won't just be filling in those boxes in that right-hand column. There will have to be quite a detailed bit of work identifying what has happened in relation to all of those recommendations. So you may well like, as the Scrutiny Committee, to look at that at the point at which it's due to come back to the corporate peer team, or you might like to look at it once they have reported on the 6-month review, which might actually be a bit more interesting for you. So I can tell you, for instance, recommendation 1, they wanted a vision statement. We've done that. So that's been done. So, work is in progress. So I would suggest that, having this back once the peer review team have been back would be the sensible point at which you could input and, make any further recommendations.
Yeah. And I think definitely as a scrutiny team, we'd looked at sort of maybe October time to have that done. Jeff Membry.
Just to draw the committee's attention to recommendation 2 of this report, which is exactly as you suggest, Councillor, that it's recommended that this committee continues to review progress against the action plan alongside the quarterly KPI reporting. So as well as getting the KPI report, we bring progress against the action plan. As the leader said, this is a live document, and at the time it was submitted for this committee, some of the actions hadn't been done. They have subsequently, and I'll be updating it when it goes to Cabinet, and it will continue to need to be updated. And if there's any particular areas that Scrutiny would like us to highlight when we bring the report back quarterly, then we'd be very happy to give you more detail about how things have progressed. It is quite, one of the things I was trying to be conscious of is this is a report that the public will read, and it's already quite a lengthy document, and I didn't want to make it overly burdensome, but I'd be very happy to provide more details about how we've progressed as we go along if the committee is interested in seeing that. And by the sound of it, the committee is very interested in seeing it.
Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Earl, did you want to come back on that at all?
I absolutely agree. I think we should see this at scrutiny, and I would like to see at least a draft report that would perhaps go to the peer reviewers before it goes to them. I think it's embarrassing if we have feedback before we've seen what's actually going to them.
And I think that's a fairly reasonable recommendation. Yeah. I'll bring in Councillor James Hobro next.
Thank you, Chair. So I had my question is jumping ahead to recommendation 9. I hope that's not moving too far ahead. So this is about our key performance indicators, KPIs, and I was trying to correlate it with the comments in the report that I thought had generated the recommendation and the action items there. And it seems to me that it's correlated with some comments that suggested that there were some areas where the KPIs were perhaps a little thin and needed revising to make sure we had really good coverage that reflected all areas of our business. So looking at the 3 action items in there that correspond to this recommendation, it seems to me that the substantive one is the middle one of the 3, which is to actively review and revise our KPIs and to involve members in that. So I just had a couple of comments on that. The first comment was that I think this is really important, so that the KPIs are the way that we understand our performance and the way that we communicate our performance to all our residents. Possibly not sort of particularly directly and meaningfully. I mean, I don't think there are many residents who are studying these graphs intently, but as we as members get questions from residents, then I certainly refer to these a lot in order to understand what's going on and how the council is progressing in certain areas. So I think they're a really key part of our understanding of our performance. So really, to sort of focus my question a little, I think a workshop to revise these is a really good idea, and I wondered whether or not that should be some kind of regular process. So this is talking about one workshop, but it does seem to me that without some kind of active focus on revising and reviewing KPIs, and this middle item is the only item I see that is a really active focus on them. Without doing that periodically, we do run the risk that they fall out of date. So it occurred to me that the KPIs, they have to provide good coverage. That's one requirement of them. They have to be meaningful, so they shouldn't be encouraging a sort of box-ticking approach, or they shouldn't be modifying behaviour simply to meet the target. We want them to encourage the right behaviour to meet the principle that they apply to. And there shouldn't be too many of them, so we don't want to keep adding more and more and more and find that some of them are duplicates or not useful. So, getting this right is not particularly simple. It would probably require some kind of periodic exercise in revising the KPIs, and I just wondered if that is what's intended here, or
okay.
I had a follow-up question about table 2, but I think I better stop and allow an answer.
Let's take this one first, and then
Thank
Councillor
you.
Bridget Smith.
So we've had to stick, during the 4-day week trial, we've had to stick with the KPIs that we had at the outset of it, because if we didn't, we started adding in new ones or dropping them, we'd be accused of manipulating our data. So that's why we've stuck with them. We have a new business plan that will be launched soon. The KPIs absolutely have to relate to the business plan, otherwise, but obviously there's some other stuff in it as well. They have to develop out of the business plan. So we review the business plan every year. So yes, I think the KPIs need to be reviewed on an annual basis to make sure that there's synergy with the business plan. I don't think they should be changed within the year because a lot of this data is fairly longitudinal data, and people don't like it if you just suddenly drop these things without any rhyme or reason, because I think you're burying the bad news. So I think we're gonna miss the March date for the workshop by the looks of it, because my diary can't fit it in before the end of this month. But I agree. I think member involvement in that, because I think as members we are the ones who will be most sighted on what it is that our residents want us to be able to evidentially talk about. And I'm glad to hear you use the quarterly performance reports, because we've done massive work on making them really accessible and really user friendly. So it's nice to hear that other people read them. But as I say, I think it needs to be an annual review, and we need to make sure that it really, really relates to the business plan. Does Jeff Membry might like to add a bit of detail?
Okay.
Yes, certainly we can do an annual review. It's worth mentioning, as I'm sure you're very aware, that actually this committee has regularly either introduced or changed the KPIs, and that the part of the role that you undertake when you review them has led to actually significant improvements, I think, in the quality of the KPIs produced. And some of the KPIs have been refocused, particularly I think in the planning area, away from those things that were being reported just because government asked us to report them, and into areas that are meaningful for residents. So I think we've got a good balance if we do it once a year, and this committee continues sort of to make those changes as necessary.
Thank you for that. Your second question, Councillor Howbrow.
Yeah, so I might just respond very briefly on that. I'm really pleased to hear that an annual review is something that's very much in focus there. I think that's a great idea. I think that's the right frequency in line with the business plan. And I suppose my only comment would be that acknowledging what you've said about the input from Scrutiny, and I'm very grateful that you're listening to this committee in terms of tweaking KPIs. I think the opportunity for an annual review is perhaps to make sure that we're looking further afield than the members of Scrutiny and bringing in a wider range of perspectives on there. So my second question was, so it's about the first row in table 2, which is clearly related to this recommendation on KPIs, about delivering a real-time information management system. So again, I was looking back at the report and trying to work out how this relates to the comments in the report. What I found in there were some comments about the time that it takes to compile data by hand presumably for the quarterly reports. And so when I read this suggestion in the actions, I wondered if the sort of the key word of real-time information here is quite the right one, and I wondered whether this is actually about automation in gathering data, rather than about the sort of rapid availability of the results. And I say this because it seems to me that the KPIs are normally things that we look at over a scale of months and maybe a year or so. Perhaps, I'm sure there's some that might change very rapidly, and we might need a rapid response, but on the whole, these are medium-term changes that we're looking at. Whereas it seemed from the report that this was mostly about automating the gathering of data rather than it being too manual and labour-intensive. So I wondered whether the term real-time, the focus on real-time, is really the right one, or whether it should perhaps be more on automation. Thank you.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Jeff Membry and possibly Councillor Milnes as well to respond. But, you know, we are moving, as a council, you know, we are looking very seriously at AI. Our chief exec runs an AI club, which, you know, loads of people come to. We had a really interesting presentation at the District Council Network Conference last week on AI. You know, it's just so exciting, and it will just, you know, drive such efficiencies within the organisations. But for the detail of this, because it's above my pay grade, I need to come to Jeff, please, first. And then,
Jeff, do you want to come in first briefly, and then I'll come to Councillor Milnes.
Yes, thank you, through you, Chair. Indeed, I think the two things go hand in hand to a certain extent. Yes, absolutely. Making the information automated, so it's actually takes less officer time to put together. Something, for example, that those members that are on Employment and Staffing Committee will have seen. The reports have changed there because they used to take up days and days of officer time, but our new system meant that we were able to automate that. But also, we're really keen that we get this real-time information so that we can respond more quickly. I mean, a really good example is we changed our software in the contact centre. We'd been struggling for a long time to hit what was a really, really challenging target of 100 seconds on average. Once we were able to use that real-time information more effectively, we're now hitting that target, getting well below it day after day after day. Often we're seeing like 20, 30-second response time because the managers are able to see in real time what's happening, move resources around and ensure that, you know, people take the lunch break at the right time, that the right queues are being covered. So yes, I'm very happy to add automated to that, but I think we certainly as officers are really keen that we keep that real-time information aspiration, because, you know, we've got that for the contact centre, we've got it for areas of planning, and I think people have seen the benefits that that's delivered in planning. We want that for all of our services. So yeah, but I'm very happy to add automated as well.
Thanks very much. Councillor Milnes.
Just very briefly, I think you know, we recognise the importance and the value in the data that we have, and presenting it in an information way, if I can use that expression. So data on its own is nothing without interpretation, and the way that we present this data is critical, and I think we're doing really excellent work on developing that strategy of data availability and turning that into information.
Briefly, Councillor Smith.
Thank you. So if I could just go back to the point about KPIs. Some of our partners produce really interesting KPIs. So, for instance, I was at the Combined Authority Board yesterday. The KPIs on road deaths are really worrying. There's been a massive increase in road deaths within Cambridgeshire. So, and that's the sort of thing our residents will be, be very interested in. So I think there's possibly a bit of work for us to do, not in generating these KPIs ourselves, but signposting members and our communities to where these, who is collating these KPIs and using them, because the Combined Authority, one of its targets is to reduce road deaths, and it's being very unsuccessful on that so far.
Thank you for that. Councillor Hober, I'm going to move on. Is that okay?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you very much, really comprehensive answers. And the reason for focusing on automation is simply I think it's a more fundamental part of the problem than the real time, but I'm really happy to hear that they're both under consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Richard Stobart, please.
Thanks, Graham. So one of the things we haven't, Councillor Earl, thank you. You mentioned the workload for this committee, but we haven't really reflected on the workload and what this committee will have to do to make sure, that what we deliver here is a good quality feedback. But it, in a sense, goes beyond. Now, I was a bit surprised to find out that we have this 6-month time period. I'm grateful for the information, but I think we've been having our discussions up till that point with an undefined timescale. So, yeah, it's 6 months, and it might explain some of the dates that we can see in the document. Now, I think to define what we need to do, we need to have this better understanding of that link between the action and the recommendation. And we've beaten about the bushes on recommendation 2 a lot. And I wondered if, and in fact, I'll go beyond that. I think it's important that we have a narrative associated with each of those recommendations which links the action with the recommendation. So I think officers have been very good at filling out that detail, but we are struggling a bit, as we've proved. We've spent a lot of airtime on recommendation 2 to actually, define what it is we're doing, and then that would become something that this committee can measure. Now, we talked about measurement, but actually achieving a series of steps, if we can define what those steps are, then I think that's a real help. But I think we need to, in a sense, manage and contain the workload of this committee in doing this very important job, which is assuring the quality of this whole process. And it goes beyond the 6 months. I think I would hope that anything we're kicking off now, we've been talking about annual review of KPIs and so on, that we will kind of perhaps blend that into our culture. Maybe that's too grand a way of putting it, but that we will continue to be interested in some of the things that are being initiated here. So if I could just mention one or two kind of details. Some of the things here are not just adding a little bit of detail to somebody's job, they are little projects. So I'd like to be sure, from the point of view of this committee, that if there is a project being defined, we're aware of it, and that the resource needs are being met. And in regard to some of the things that we've been talking about, for example, are we doing better with our parish councils? Then perhaps at some stage we should be gathering evidence from some of our partners. So actually going out into the field or actually calling them in and having a good discussion perhaps with a group of parish council chairs, to see that's going on. But I tend to think district councillors can, in this context, so members, I hope you don't mind me saying this, that we can be facilitators for some of the things that have been going on. So we're not just silent witnesses, if you will, at parish council meetings. We do engage, and we can be quite creative in that engagement. So I think there are some opportunities for us to do some more stuff in that regard. But let me just come back to the first point. I really think it's important we have the narrative that connects actions and recommendations. And Mr. Membry, you talked about a living document, sorry, through you, Chair. And I think let's make this a living document that we're all contributing to, and let's fill that narrative out and then make it work for the feedback in 6 months' time, but also make it continue into the future. So, sorry, I've rambled on.
No, no,
That
that's
makes
okay.
sense.
So I think sort of the recommendation within that touches on measuring, breaking down into points, some focus on the long term as well as the short term. Yeah, I'll let Bridget Smith take that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to push back on that, I'm afraid. So, you know, what you have in front of you is the action plan as required by the LGA, in the format as required by the LGA. And Jeff has already said it's already quite a chunky document, but it's a document we actually want people to read. There's a real danger that we turn it into a Tolstoy novel, which would take masses of officer resource. We would be second guessing some of this stuff. You know, you've got to think about why would we be producing something at this stage that would give all the detail of how we were going to do it all? Because quite a lot is, you know, quite a lot of this is kind of exploratory stuff. So, you know, we've fulfilled the requirements of the LGA by presenting this. They will, in 6 months' time, we will have produced a report, and a lot of that evidence that I think you're wanting will be in that report that we produce for their 6-month review. This is the what, and the how, and the evidence will be in that 6-monthly report. I don't see the value for us, and I mean, officers might disagree with me, but I don't see what the value is of us beefing this up with masses of narrative at this stage of the game, because we might not know what it is, and just what value will it add? I think we need to be, we know what we're trying to achieve. I think that 6-month update, and then there can be another for you in 6 months' time. I think it's far better to be reporting on what we've done rather than writing reports about what we are going to do, that we then have to write another report about what we have done. I mean, I'd quite like Jeff to tell me whether I've got that all wrong, but I'm just trying to avoid unnecessary work and to make sure that we understand what the corporate peer review has asked of us, and we're sticking to that.
Thank you, Councillor Bridget. Did you want to just come back in, Councillor Stobart?
I didn't regard kind of bulk as an objective here rather than clarity. So I think I could write that narrative for a number of these recommendations, given what I've heard now. It wouldn't be very long. And I think if it were like a paragraph or two, I think that would be fine. I think the discussion of communities to say, well, actually, we're watching the communities and working with them and taking feedback, because, you know, one of our goals with communities is to facilitate each community to find its own goal. So, you know, this is not going to be, you know, here's the work programme, we need to inspect the work programme. It's going to be more like, are we, in a qualitative sense, going in the right direction? And so, yeah, by narrative leader, through you, Chair, I just wanted to say that it's a connection, and it might be quite brief, but it just captures the essence, if you will, of the connection between the recommendation and the
I'll just bring Jeff Membry in as well to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, as the leader has said, I think if you Google peer review action plans and have a look at what other authorities have done, this is already rather larger than most authorities because I think councillors are aware of the fact that it's a public document that the public read. As I've already said, I think if this committee agrees to review progress against the action plans on a quarterly basis, we've got the opportunity when we come back to perhaps do deep dives into particular areas of the recommendations, so that we can tie these things together and show the committee in more detail about sort of how we've gone and done things and what the benefits that's going to bring in the future. I think that work, we're very happy to do that. I think I'd be reluctant to add too much more to this document at this stage, because I want it to be easily digested by people that work in the council, my colleagues, and the public that's going to read it. But so very happy to bring more detail on individual things going forward.
Okay, Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So just to pick up on what Jeff said, my thoughts were going exactly that way. If there's anything specific in this that you want to do that deep dive in, then it would, we'd appreciate you kind of doing it that way, because some of it's, perfectly obvious, perfectly clear, and you don't need a load of narrative on it. But if there's anything in particular that, Scrutiny thinks it can add value to, because this isn't just about us feeding you information, it's about you identifying stuff where you add value to it, rather than just, because, we used to have the days where Scrutiny just noted everything, and, this has been a really good meeting, because actually we're coming out of it with lots of really helpful recommendations. So, I think that'd be more productive.
Councillor Stobart.
I think that's an offer from Cabinet and officers, to allow us to go into in depth, and I think that's an offer we should take up.
I think that's reasonable.
It would, and we could, for example, come back and look at recommendation 2, and maybe recommendation, whichever the community's one is, 6. Look at them together and so on. So, I mean, it would be up to you, Chair, to decide, but I think that's a reasonable offer of something we can get our teeth into and really think about.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stobart, and I think that's been recognised by the leadership team, and that we can dig deep into some of those areas. So I'll move on, if that's okay. Yeah. To Councillor Sue Ellington.
Thank you. I was looking particularly at page 19, where we are talking about doing a residence survey in October 24. And my first thought was, what on earth are we waiting till October to do it? And my second thought was, how will that affect any potential election, or be affected by any potential election? And I thought perhaps we needed to have contingency plans, as it were, if you're going to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Ellington. Councillor Bridget Smith.
Yeah, we're constantly under the threat of elections, aren't we, at the moment? So we're just about to go into the pre-election period now for the Police and Crime Commissioner one. So yes, I mean, I think, the reason for not doing it this side of summer is that we have elections, and actually we have an awful lot on our plate at the moment. So I think, the reason for saying October was that we thought there would be some capacity within the organisation. But as you say, if there's an October general election, then I think that's probably, we couldn't do it, I'm told. Okay, so we'd need to go to plan B. Can't do it in the summer holidays, can't do it in the Christmas holidays, can't do it when there's elections. So, yeah, good point.
Liz Watts.
Thanks, and it's a really well-made point. Thanks, Councillor Wellington. I think it's really hard to plan anything this year if you're thinking about pre-election issues. The reason we did put it a bit later in the year was because the County Council did a quality of life survey last year, and we knew that they were interested in potentially working with district councils this year, and so we wanted to give ourselves enough time to understand what that would look like, and would that be something that could work, or did we want to do something independent? But and we haven't kind of done that piece of work yet. I think it's a well-made point, and we can certainly plan for whatever survey it is we do, and clearly once it's launched, if it were launched and there was an election called a couple of days afterwards, we may well need to pause it. But if it were launched and we were sort of 3.5 weeks into a 4-week window, we would probably leave it open. So just too much uncertainty to be able to be definitive, but it's a well-made point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ellington?
Just to say, I do find quite a lot of these surveys are very biased in their approach, and I ask that members, there should be a small task and finish group to help to ensure that all members feel comfortable with what we're asking.
Happy to agree with that.
Yeah, we'll take that as a recommendation. Thank you for that, Councillor Ellington. Councillor Stephen Drew, please.
Okay, if I can go to recommendation 7. what is different about a people strategy to the current HR activities that the council engages in?
Councillor Bridget Smith. No rush.
I feel better for you having a think, because I was too.
Can I defer to Jeff Membry, please?
Jeff Membry.
Yeah, I think this is an overarching strategy which brings together some of the work that we've already done around, say, hybrid working, looks at the sort of the impact of that and some of the other initiatives that we've put together, starts ensuring that we've got our succession plan in place, and comes up with recommendations for how we use incentives going forward. One of the things that we've found is that the incentives that we've been using around recruitment intention needs to evolve as the marketplace evolves. So it effectively brings a lot of the work that we're already doing together in one strategy.
Okay, great, thank you. So it struck me that in terms of the peer review report, yes, there are challenges and such like, but overall it is complementary and positive in terms of the way in which South Cambs as an employer works with its staff. So the fact that it is a pulling together makes a lot more sense. Recommendation 8. Would I be correct in interpreting this idea of develop a clear narrative for transformation as being a comment in relation to the peer review and then the recommendations that says the transformation strategy the council has undergone has clearly had great positive impacts in terms of saving money, in terms of reducing costs, but that there needs to be a clearer presentation of it. There needs to be a clear explanation of it, because I didn't see anything within the peer review report which made me have any concerns about the transformation programme, that made me feel that there were any issues in relation to how it was organised, So will I be right in saying this recommendation really is about the presentation of it rather than anything else?
Yeah, I think you've got it there. You know, it's something that, you know, it's business as usual. It's something that's going on all the time. I think sometimes people don't understand what transformation means. In a lot of councils, of course, transformation equals job losses. And, you know, what we're doing is driving savings and you know, improving performance and so on here. So I think it's about clarification. You know, clarification of that. I mean, could Jeff add anything to that? I think
Yeah, yes, exactly that. I think what they're recognising is that those services that have gone through a service review, so have had regular contact with transformation, understand it. But although we've launched the transformation programme in the past for some of our services, although they've been doing some work to improve the way their processes have, they've not yet had that interaction with the transformation team. So getting out the reminder of what the programme's looking to achieve, why we're doing it, and that it's not just something that's over there and only about the transformation team, it's about the whole council and how they need to contribute towards the policy. So yes, it's a communication, strengthening of communication, really.
Great, thank you very much. If I can go to, excuse me, not doing very well here. If I can go to recommendation 12, I know we've discussed a little bit in relation to Councillor Leeming raised and other people have raised as well. I suppose really, since it strikes me as an opportunity, I'd be interested in my capacity as Vice Chair, as I'm sure the Chair would be as well, to know from yourself, Councillor Smith, or maybe from Liz Watson, the CEO, what, from your understanding in terms of the work that is recommended within this work programme and improvement report, that you would see changing about the way that Scrutiny Overview does its work. Because the recommendation says undertake an effectiveness review of the Council's Overview and Scrutiny Committee. So I was wondering if you had any just small points you could put in our direction that you would see as changing about the way that the committee works.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Okay, I'll be really tactful here, haven't I?
It's an open forum, isn't it?
So this has been a really good meeting, and you know it's a particularly. I think this sort of item demonstrates where scrutiny's time is well spent, because you're coming up with recommendations that will all then come back to our cabinet, and we will accept them, reject them, modify them. But what we won't do is ignore them. And being part of that debate is really useful. I think certainly in the past, and I'm talking about quite distant past, you know, it's very frustrating that people give up long periods of their evening just to hear that papers are noted. Because you just go, well, why has that come to scrutiny? If you've got that, all you're going to do is note it. So I think, hopefully through all the triangulation meetings, we're getting better at identifying, those things where scrutiny is useful both to Cabinet, but useful to the Council as a whole through its contributions. Because, at the end of the day, we want to come out of the scrutiny meeting going, okay, well, that was productive. That's improved things. That's added value.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just finish building something on that Councillor Ellington said. So it goes into page 19, the third row of the section that is headed Other Advice Suggestions. I'm always intrigued by this in relation to undertaking an independent survey. And I suppose my thoughts are, what exactly will the Council be doing to ensure that the survey, when it's undertaken, absolutely gets responses from some of our most difficult to reach groups? And the two I'm going to flag up are young people, since we worked on a young people task and finish group. And the other one I'm going to flag up is probably middle-aged people. I will count myself as that. Middle-aged people who go to work every morning and have zero interaction with the council, except for when their bins are collected, because that represents a significant number of residents in the district who probably couldn't tell you who their district councillor was, who would have no idea probably even which political party was running the council, who probably couldn't even tell you that the council was based in Camborne. And I would say that is a significant number of people who live in the district. I have professional friends who live in other districts who I would consider to be incredibly well educated and knowledgeable, and I ask them, and they literally have no idea which political party runs their council. They don't even know where their council's head office is, and they couldn't give you the name of their councillor, yet they are paying a large amount of council tax every year, and their only interaction with their district council is the collecting bids, as far as they are concerned. So how will we make sure that that group is also included in any survey we do?
Thank you. Am I working? Right. So, I could add some other groups to that. Sure. Hard to read. I've spent today with a Gypsy Traveller family, again, hard to reach, but actually often very grateful for the services that we offer. Is that somebody's baby crying? Is that right, so actually, we have a really good track record of engaging through our consultation. Our local plan got way more, hits on it than in the past. So I think we are good. We are good at this, and we've done it by making these things look attractive and welcoming people in by keeping them simple and so on. So I think we've got a good track record. We've got an outstanding comms team who are really experienced at this. But a large part of the responsibility rests with members, because we all write monthly reports for our communities, and the number one item needs to be, we're doing a resident survey, chaps. Here's the link to it. Do it. And if you can't get online, give me a knock and I'll give you a paper copy. So I think a large part of that rests with members' responsibility to engage with their communities, and with their parish councils and with those hard to reach groups. But as I say, we as a council will do as much and more as much as we possibly can. But actually, as members, we've got to take some responsibility as well.
Thank you. I am done, Councillor Cohen.
Thank you, Councillor Drew. Councillor Anna Bradnam, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. So our purpose here is not just to note things, but to send them forward to Cabinet. So with just some simple ones, in addition to the comment that Councillor Hobro made earlier, could we just, in the report that goes to Cabinet, would it be possible to expand on page 16, the middle column, the abbreviation TOM, I assume it means Target Operating Model. Google did come up with Tom Cruise, I don't think it meant that. So the other one is that at the bottom of page 1, just before it goes on to table 2, it refers to the triangulation meetings, and I think that should be CEO, not just CE. leader, chair and vice chair. So then the more substantive issue I wanted to raise, I actually think this would have been obviously everybody has said what a useful exercise it's been, and that's great, and it's important, and it's good that we have outside scrutiny, fresh eyes looking at what we're doing and consulting with people and finding out how we can do our job better. But now comes the emperor's new clothes bit, and I'm one of these people who is prepared to say things. I think this whole exercise would have been a darn sight easier if the recommendations that we had got were clearer. Now, I assumed when we were looking at this, and I was looking at it, I thought, oh, there'll be more detail in the final report. But, oh no, there isn't. What's actually written in our recommendations is precisely, with the exception of a few words, just looking at recommendation 6, which was the one that Councillor Leeming raised about community strategy, and we'd gone to community statement. That is almost exactly the same wording as we were given in this final report, with the exception that in the final report it says, and in order to fully harness opportunities. But what it's talking about is or I think it's talking about, is developing community strategies that will enable a structured focus around enabling and supporting communities and further build on the relationships with the voluntary and community sector and parishes who want to work closer with the council in order to fully harness opportunities. So actually that one is one of the rather easier ones to understand, but I actually wanted to congratulate the officers for having come up with sensible suggestions for what actions we might take to deliver what is a rather vague, if I may say so, and I will take that upon myself. This is not words of the council, this is me. Vague recommendations from the peer review group. We can understand the gist of what they're getting at, and I wanted to thank the officers for coming up with some realistic actions to undertake it, and by golly, some dates by which some things have already been done and some things are projected to be done. So I think well done to South Cambs District Council for actually interpreting a rather difficult report into something that is a working it's got an indication of what we want to do to try and progress this. So I just wanted to say congratulations on that translation.
Do you want to just note that?
Well, just say thank you very much. And the amount of debate we've had about recommendation 2 absolutely exemplifies what you're saying about it being woolly. So I will take the compliment on behalf of the people who've actually done all the hard work.
Lovely. Councillor Leeming, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is quite a brief thing. It's about recommendation 5, which is to do with membership development. I just wondered whether this would be something that a member could perhaps take a lead on, in addition to, and I think it's Andy Francis, isn't it, who's named as AF. Yes. So perhaps there could be a partnership between a member and the officer on this, given that it is about our development. And secondly, I just thought that the other thing was with this, there's 2 sort of aspects to training and understanding our roles that might be helpful. There's the general stuff, which we all have as district councillors, but I think it would be really helpful to have an audit of the technical understanding that people on specific committees may need. We underwent a process with audit and governance. We did a SIPFA analysis process of what we were doing, and it was really useful. So I'm just wondering whether we could have 2 threads to this, the technical skills and the generalist things that we'd all be involved in.
Councillor Bridget Smith.
Thank you. So member development, I think, comes under Councillor Milne's responsibility. He will be there, and I know we'll be talking to all members. It's very important that we listen to members, because there's no point at us putting on training that people don't want to do. And sometimes, participation in training, other than the statutory training, can be a bit patchy, quite honestly. So, I think we put on a lot of stuff. But again, it's horses and water again. Obviously, those statutory committees, people have to participate in training. I think, whether we can actually give them a test on their level of understanding or not, I don't know. But I think by making sure that they get refreshers, that they get refresher training at regular intervals, hopefully people build up their expertise within areas. I don't.
That's
You're
fine. I
laughing.
just didn't want to particularly take on the onus of testing fellow members.
Councillor Mills, I have no wish to be tested by you in any forum.
Lovely. We'll move on. Councillor Rippeth, please.
Thank you. I was going to say, I don't think this is that long a report, and I'm speaking as a normal member as well as a member of this council. Partly because it's really accessible, because the layout is good, the format. So I think the format of, but you can hone in on what you want to read. Like if you're just, you're a resident, for example, and you think, oh, I'm interested in this, so you go to that. It's quite clear, it's in bold, and then you read across and look at what's happening. So this is kind of, I'm trying not to repeat what other people have said, but with the progress chart, and it might be helpful, as Councillor Earle said, about putting in a little bit more detail as to, completed tick. Well, what was it like? What was completed a bit more specifically? Maybe some colour coding, because then you can show the progress of the report, so it's like a working document, without sort of redoing the whole thing. And if you want something a little bit longer, if you're more Councillor Stobart type of resident, a bit more narrative, there could be like an asterisk to something which gives a few more paragraphs, or obviously online that would be a link. So it's like kept as a sort of summary document here with a bit more layers behind it. Now, my only comment was really, this is quite readable, I thought, and please continue with that, but also make it show that things are being sort of tweaked and changed, and also if there's a strategy, that it's really evident what's going forward. Thank you.
Thank
More
you.
a comment than a question.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think we've touched on the fact that it's a live document and so forth, and those points that Councillor Stobart also made about the narrative, and Councillor Earle as well. I think the leader has said, taken those on board. Do we have any other speakers on this item at all? Nope. Okay, so I think we will now come to the recommendation, which is on page 9. So you'll see it's broken down into two parts, part A and part B. So if members could just familiarise themselves with part A at point 5 on page 9. I think we have thoroughly done that this evening, and Ian has noted a whole host of recommendations, and the leader and cabinet members have engaged in that. So is everybody happy that we've done that with those recommendations? Agreed? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then in terms of part B of that recommendation, and we have discussed this during the meeting, but we're happy that the reports do come back to us in the timeframes that have been set out, and we revisit those as we discussed earlier in the meeting at the 6-month interval. Is that all agreed? Agreed? Yeah? Okay. So we'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is the work programme, pages 21 to 34. So Councillor Drew and myself and members of the Cabinet will continue to meet to formulate an action plan going forward and bring things that members want to see at the Scrutiny Committee and make sure that they're on that agenda. Is everybody happy with that? Councillor Bradnam?
Sorry, we are on item 6, aren't we?
We are.
Yeah, I just wanted to check. I think we thought we might be useful to even consider bringing back the peer review in the meeting on 17th of October.
October, I think we said, yeah. So I think that sounds very reasonable given the timescales that we've talked about, but I'll continue to work with officers and cabinet members just, to make sure that is doable. So thank you for that, Councillor Bradnam. Any other questions, recommendations or anything for the work programme? No, okay. So in that case, I will draw the meeting to a close. Thank you very much for attending.